Heroes 5 is my favorite Heroes-like game of all time. Sure, it has flaws, but the sheer amount of innovation it brought to the series while still being a tremendously good entry makes it my most beloved Heroes game ever. This part done it all. It went 3D, it used a fresh turn system, created some of the most engaging hero progression I've seen, while still managing to design each unit from every faction with the utmost care and passion. I never truly understood its greatness back in the day. It was my favorite, but I was never able to grasp just how good it was when it released. I grew up without fancy schmancy things in my life. While I was only getting started with Heroes 3, the 5th part was already being released to the world, and only a couple of years later it would come to my little village bubble. It's possible that I might have played King's Bounty the Legend before I touched Home 5, although that part of my life is blurry and I'm not fully confident about it. But I am certain about one thing. For me, this part is the true king of Heroes of Might and Magic. Let's get this show started with the graphics. Surprisingly, the action cameras are very well integrated into the game. I never felt like they were overused or that they made me sick like in Disciples 3. They also highlight the quality of models and animations, because even when viewed from a very close distance, those polygons look fantastic despite the years. Sure, the textures are a bit pixelated, but the overall look of the units is fantastic. Stylized graphics age differently. Every single creature looks memorable. I had huge issues selecting one for the thumbnail of this video, because every single one of them looks like someone's favorite. Genies with their ginormous hands and heavy scimitars. Pitlords, which I believe are the best version of Pitlords I've ever seen. Air Elementals with a face like this. Developers really pulled a magic trick here. Not only did they went full 3D, but they also completely nailed it. They blew everything out of the water. Heroes 5 was released 2 years before King's Bounty the Legend and 3 years before Disciples 3. There were no other 3D Heroes-like games up to this point, and they still crushed the art direction. Unit silhouettes are clear, colors are grounded but vivid, the size of the units feels fantastic. The grandeur of towns reveals their true scale like never before. Art direction is simply excellent. Each model is brought to life with masterfully crafted animations. All of them have weight behind them. They are quick, transparent, plus it's easy to understand them. Even units with very unique designs are brought to life in a believable way. I can't imagine those units moving in any other fashion. If they were to exist in real life, I bet they would move like they do in the game. As for towns, the way they are upgraded has changed a bit. Available structures are based on the level of the city. And I hate it, because it forces the player to build facilities he might not need. It's not possible to create a town that is focused only on a specific dwelling. It also makes cities of different factions very similar in how they are developed. There's nothing like Fortress from Heroes 3 in which it was possible to buy wyverns in 4 days, in a town that had nothing at the beginning. Now everybody needs a level 15 city to build a tier 7 unit. Another thing that has changed is the cost of heroes and war machines. Each additional hero increases the cost of subsequent ones by 500, and the blacksmith asks for a liver in exchange for his creations. I didn't notice any impact on the game because of those adjustments. It is kinda funny, however, that buying a character with a war machine might be a good way of getting it cheaper. Just don't check if your newly recruited hero still has his kidney. I do, however, have a small problem with how the tavern rolls available recruits. In Heroes 5, the hero faction plays a much more vital role than before. Army composition is not the only modifier that affects units' morale. Having a hero whose allegiance is different from his troops also causes them to be unhappy. If there's a demon commander with 11 units, those units will receive morale debuff even if there are no units of other factions. Going back to the tavern, it's really weird that the game allows heroes from the opposite side to show up in the first week of the game. It sucks to be offered a rival faction hero at the beginning of the mission. I'm not even asking for the same race, just the same allegiance, and just in the first week. While I'm on the topic of heroes, I love that their speed and penalty from difficult to move terrain is no longer based on their units. In a game like Heroes, it makes way more sense because it allows the army to be more diverse without punishing the player for choosing a slower unit of a different faction. Combat fantasy is no longer taking a stray hit because of movement optimization, and I am all for it. While the technical requirements list only 1 GB of hardware space required, after just a couple of missions, GOG was already crying to me that it cannot synchronize cloud saves because they exceed 200 MB limit. And I was only getting started. At the moment of finishing the game on a single difficulty level with no additional missions played, saves were eating up 2300 MB of storage. That's more than the game itself wants. What the fuck? First, I enjoyed figuring out ways to manipulate AI. Finding specific unit interactions that beat neutral monsters with a minimal number of troops feels fantastic. Learning the intricacies of a system and bending it to your will is a wonderful way of experiencing a game. The fact that there's something to grasp is amazing. Finding small optimizations around the properties of a square grid, abusing large monsters, outmaneuvering AI. However, it requires the AI to be decent enough. And sorry, but an AI that will not attack a summoned unit because it just dislikes doing it doesn't cut it. Winning a fight with just a couple of succubi and imps versus a horde of Rakshasa Raja because they have a spell they prefer to cast rather than attack a summoned unit is really not that fulfilling. Decimating an entire enemy army which the bot decided to group versus a warlock with a meteor shower feels cheap. It feels bad to win against it because it's straight up trolling, and don't get me started on the AI running away on heroic. Good fucking lord! On the highest difficulty level, if the AI determines that it cannot win, it will instantly give up and abandon the fight. This system is so extreme that the AI will run away from fights that were scripted if it feels like it will not succeed. In Agriel's campaign, when he attacked a tree shugger, the flower sniffer instantly tapped out, hearing a second later in a cutscene that
"They fight well for stargazing poets."
fucking hell, that is an insult to injury. It's always easier to spot the lack of quality of life features in a game. It jumps at the player. But if something works smoothly like an oiled machine, then it's hard to appreciate. So, what works so well it's hard to even notice. Traveling on the strategic map is easier than ever. The game is capable of processing paths through water, undergrounds, hell, even this maze of portals. I was shocked when I realized that instead of trying to find a proper way out of this labyrinth, I was able to just press on the exit and my hero would cruise his way through the world like Tesla on autopilot. It's now possible to leave units out of combat, which is such a lifesaver. This is fantastic. There are units that are very skilled at dealing with specific enemies, but in order to achieve flawless victory, they require no other allied creatures on the battlefield. Allowing the player to freely manipulate stacks right before combat makes it so much easier to travel around the map with the entire army. Now it's possible to have all units with heroes at all time. No need to leave, split or exchange stacks for a specific fight. Speaking of which, weirdly enough, there is no give the entire army to this hero button. Somehow in a game where units and items will be transferred very often, there is no option to swap army and artifacts between heroes. It's also very hard to precisely navigate around the strategic map. It's surprisingly hard to click on the world elements, and it's even harder to cancel the movement of the hero. An awful lot of inputs have a small delay before they are executed. Kiting a big stack of units for 40 turns takes eternity. Even at the highest animation speed, it can still drag out for so long that I would frequently just skip combats like this. Even if winning them would grant me a lot of tempo and advantage, I would not do them. It wasn't worth my time. While on the topic of wasting part of the 700,000 hours of my life just to have the game allow me to keep playing, God, it takes so long for the AI to move in this game. A match versus 7 AIs feels like watching paint dry. Even if you select the highest possible AI speed, it still has to calculate the move itself, and it takes so long. I love races in Heroes 5. Units have incredibly unique designs. Heroes have very distinct playstyles thanks to their specializations as well as faction skills and talents. Warrior and mage archetypes are no longer present within a single faction. Only one type of hero is available. Each one of them has his own way of achieving victory. For instance, necromants have units that are generally worse than their counterparts, but they try to dominate enemies with the sheer number of units that come from necromancy, which can finally be balanced because of the existence of life energy that dictates how many units they can resurrect per week. But factions are interesting not only because of mechanical play. Take Silver Cities as an example, with wizards who have basically summoned or enslaved everything to do their bidding. Although there are also races that are quite basic, like Haven and their unit flavor texts. Very practical explanations with nothing interesting in terms of trivia. Hero skills are mostly the same: attack, defense, logistics, luck, morale. If you knew them in Heroes 3, then you still know them. The major difference is that now there are also faction skills as well as a completely new mechanic, which is the abilities. I love race skills. Maybe not all of them are the greatest and most engaging, but it is awesome to see the originality of heroes depending on their faction. Necropolis though is not that groundbreaking. Necromancy is a staple mechanic at this point. There is nothing to gizz about here. It's better now because there's a lever the designer can use to make it more balanced. So there are no more legions of skeletons running a rampart whenever the necro is left alone for too long. Aside from that, it's still possible to turn creatures from other factions to undead ones. Although now it's possible to transform units into corresponding levels rather than change everything into skeletons. Neat. As for Haven, their skill is pretty interesting and deep. Your units counter-attack harder. Wait, wasn't their skill practice? God, I always forgot that they have the counter-attack skill. Their faction building in their cities allow them to train their units, which makes them into a higher tier unit, with the only exception that they cannot be changed into a griffon or an angel. And this is really fucking cool. It costs a leg and an arm to do, but it's such an awesome way to play around with the unit composition. Players themselves can decide if they are focused on having more archers or melee units. If there's a stack that was badly damaged and wouldn't do a lot on its own, it can be changed into another unit. Awesome! Reshaggers have their Avenger skill. It's a bit straightforward in terms of its effect. Troops of the hero have a chance to critically strike a unit. The unit, however, has to be selected in town beforehand. But to do that, first, the hero must kill 2 stacks of said creature to unlock it for the selection. This is the reason why I personally hate the skill. Going back to town in Heroes 5 is not as easy as it used to be. While the town portal spell exists, it's not possible to select the destination city. It will always teleport to the nearest one. However, during the majority of campaign missions, the closest city to the hero that leads the attack will not be the Sylvanas city, but rather the freshly conquered one that is of the enemy faction. So, the teleport is basically useless, while traveling to the allied town on foot takes forever. This makes Avenger a very cool skill that is so impractical that it's rendered useless. Inferno has gating, which allows their units to summon copies of themselves. This plays very well into their fantasy of winning quick or losing even quicker. Inferno has the most paper-thin units in the entire game. Their heroes have very small chance of getting defense attribute, but they accumulate attack as if it's the only statistic available. They hit hard. So having an opportunity to tank a couple of counterattacks with some summoned troops plays very well with their fantasy. It also intertwines with the game's story around demons, which is also quite cool. Since Inferno doesn't require anything from town to enable gating, they get a free sacrificial pit to get some XP for unwanted troops. A good old killing for experience. Dungeon's skill is called Irresistible Magic. It partially nullifies the enemy magic resists. But the true main special mechanic of Warlocks is called Elemental Vision, which allows them to see elements on enemy creatures, and use it to deal more damage with spells that are from the opposite school. With a bonus structure in town, it's also possible to trigger this effect with unit attacks. Bonus is based on the final damage, so if the attack doesn't pack a punch by itself, then the bonus effect won't change that much. It's one of those mechanics that make the player win even harder, but if he is already losing, then it won't change that much. I'm not a huge fan of functionalities like that, because they don't affect the gameplay as hard as they suggest. They do, however, look flashy. Something about deleting a stack from existence with a singular spell always makes me smile. Just like Inferno, Dungeon also doesn't require a building to enable their racial skill, and again, just like Inferno, their faction structure allows them to kill units. But unlike Inferno, instead of getting experience, the weekly growth of Minotaurs and Furies is increased. It's a novel idea, however the problem is that the thresholds are so high that it's very hard to tell whether or not it's really useful to sacrifice units. It's based on HP of the sacrificed stacks. It doesn't display how much you already sacrificed, and each subsequent growth increase requires double the amount of health to be spilled for Furies and triple the amount for Minotaurs. Both of those units are very powerful, but the requirements are just so astronomically high, it's hard to tell if it's really worth it. Last but not least is the Academy Tinkerer skill. Mages of the Silver Cities either enslave other nations to do their job, or summon and create golems to do that for them. Yes, even titans are just big as golems. Anyway, they like to create stuff, so the player can also create stuff when he plays them. Mainly trinkets that can be handed to the units to boost their stats. It's a really fun mechanic, and it matches the fantasy of the faction as well. Tinkering with stats of the units is so amazing. It's possible to turn creatures into monsters with specific setups. For instance, it's possible to increase the magic resist of units by a lot, making the Armageddon a viable choice. Aside from racial skills, each hero can also have up to 5 generic skills that are available to all factions. While more staple ones like armor, attack or luck haven't changed a bit, there are also some that have been adjusted to be more compelling. Some of them got demoted to abilities, about which I will talk in a moment. Enlightenment is one of those that remains a skill while receiving a special treatment. It no longer provides only additional experience, but also bonus stats, and that's what makes it interesting even for heroes that have already gained a lot of levels. I really like how this change managed to bring this skill closer to the other ones, which also happened to War Machines that were all condensed into a single skill, making it a very powerful choice. Ballista and First Aid Tent are much more important. Playing around them is not only possible, but also feels great. I love that all skills are good now. This is a game where logistics should always be at the top of the skill priority list, but because of how intertwined talents are and how the skills are just really good overall, it's no longer a default choice like before, and I am all for it. The new addition to the hero's development is the abilities system. Each level of a skill enables the hero to receive one ability connected to that specific skill. If you upgrade attack by 1 point, you will now also be able to select an attack ability next time you level up. And this is the meat of the hero progression in the game. While skills are more generic in their nature, giving increased bonuses to various statistics, abilities on the other hand can enable some very powerful effects. Because each hero has unique faction skill, unique abilities are also part of the deal, and they rock so hard. They upgrade both race skills and powers, making it important to use heroes who have already leveled up, rather than fresh blood. They are fun, unique, some of them completely busted, and some a bit basic. As for regular ones, they shape how the heroes will win combat, explore the world, and support the entire kingdom. It's important to note that some skills from Heroes 3 became abilities. For instance, mysticism became regeneration, intelligence became, well, intelligence, but as an ability, not a skill. Eagle Eye became arcane intuition. Which is actually kinda useful now, since you can learn abilities that are cast by the monsters with not that garbage chance to trigger as well. Now it will always happen, so if you let Archangels cast Resurrection and you have Expert Light Magic, you no longer have to build that level 5 Mage Guild, and this is amazing! Before, those skills were interesting but not that great because they would eat up an important slot. There were more powerful options available, but now they are often a part of the path to some very unique abilities. Because aside from 3 basic abilities under each skill, there are also some hidden special ones. Standard abilities have effects that are rather normal. They cannot be too advanced since they are available to all races. But those hidden ones, they can be faction specific, which allows them to be much more unique and awesome. Haunted Mines make necromancers populate captured mines with ghosts. Imbue Ballista allows the Sylvanas heroes to use Imbue Shot with a Ballista. What's an Imbue Shot? Well, basically it makes the hero cast a spell at the target of his attack, so if they want, they can both hit the enemy with an attack and a spell at the same time. Having Imbued Ballista causes each of its shots to cast Imbued spell as well. This, paired together with an ability that allows Ballista to shoot 3 times, creates quite a devastating combo. And that's fucking amazing. Warlocks can unlock an ability that makes their destructive spells also roll full luck. So, they can just obliterate half the screen with a lucky meteor strike. There's a lot of very interesting abilities, but the most powerful are the ultimate ones. Those are tremendously powerful talents that each hero can unlock. Scratch that. Some heroes actually cannot, because their starting talents clogs the skill tree and makes it impossible for them to learn the ultimate. No big deal, right? Well, how does always hit a lucky shot sound to you? Or learn all spells there are in the game? Quite OP, right? Get this one. If your unit receives damage in melee, your hero will damage the attacker. Wait, that's not that great. There must be a mistake, right? Well, while it's not as powerful as an implosion, it only costs the hero half a turn to select allied troop that will receive that buff. After that, it stays on that unit until it dies, so the hero is free to do whatever he wants in the subsequent turns. Plus, this attack does pack a punch. It allows the hero to kill 3 tier 7 units per attack, as well as around an entire growth of every creature whenever the ability is triggered. I think that while it's not as showy as instant gating, it is still quite brutal considering that Haven is focused on defense. Inquisitors paired with squires that protect them from range attacks must be engaged in melee, and they just don't die. So yeah, I would say that not being able to get those abilities can be a missed opportunity, especially during the campaign, because some people will play only the campaign. Making it impossible for them to play around with those special abilities is straight up weird. The way the game is remembered is so much different if the player heroes can achieve godhood. Like, hey yo, I just finished the Sylvanas campaign, it was pretty cool. Versus, I created a monster with units that always crit and just obliterate the entire enemy army. Such a difference. The remaining piece of the hero's power are the specializations. And now there are some more complex ones. Basic specializations like unit bonuses still exist, but even those received some treatment. Irina, who is the Griffon Master, not only makes them better, but also allows the basic Griffons to use the Skydive ability. Erwina, the Coven Mistress, doesn't actually increase the attack and armor of the mistresses. Instead, she makes them shot additional attack at the target of her spells. Deleb's ballista shots explode on impact. She was my favorite hero when I first played the game. Something about explosions! That was also before I learned about imbued ballista and that you can cast 3 meteor showers instead of just some fireballs. Overall, I love hero progression in Heroes 5. I love how skills and abilities create varied gameplay and allow different strategies to emerge. Swarm Queen's specialization of Dirael creates a very powerful combination together with Sylvanas' unique Rain of Arrows skill that can also inflict Imbue Shot. This makes it possible for Verdyh to never allow any unit on her target list to move during combat, because the swarm of bees on the highest level of mastery reduces the ATB value of the enemy creatures by a lot. It's amazing how combination of skills and masteries can devastate the enemy. It's so fun to explore. However, this also means that a hero with just a couple of levels is already much more powerful than a freshly recruited Beansprout. Even just a single decent ability can heavily influence the power of the army. With power spikes much more cleanly defined, it makes it way more rewarding to level up heroes. I love this system so much. The only problem that I had was that I would get clogged a bit from time to time with unwanted ability. You see, each slot of the level up is prioritizing something else. The top left one is for new skills, bottom left is for upgrading already obtained skills, top right is for basic abilities, while the bottom right is for those special ones. So, if you upgrade something that enables a special ability that you don't want, you might get cock-blocked a bit. With the rise of games like Vampire Survivors, the option to ban, reroll and lock choices on level ups is something that I never before knew I needed in a system like this. Having more flexibility that is available in modern games spoiled me. It makes it so much easier to create the dream build, as well as to recover from a fuck up or just bad RNG. Some skill trees have very unfortunate progression which enables unwanted special abilities. This makes them show up over and over again, blocking the traits that the player is actually looking for. However, I also understand that there's actually nothing wrong with not having those modern quality of life improvements. This way, it's more uncertain which build exactly the player will end up with. It makes it more randomized and not so repetitive. The second problem I had was with the lack of skill wheel in the game. It's just not possible to see all hidden abilities and what requirements each of them has. However, just like with the rerolls, I do understand that implementing the skill wheel can also cause harm. There are reasons why it's okay not to do that. Figuring out what is necessary to unlock special abilities is way more fulfilling. I still remember finding out new abilities myself without having access to the internet. It felt amazing. Heroes 5 is old. Back when it was released, it wasn't standard to instantly Google solutions the moment a tiny amount of friction showed up. Figuring out solutions was a very integral part of enjoying the game. But I do believe that there was a way to marry both of those requirements. If there was a skill wheel inside the game, but it would only show the special abilities that were at least once unlocked, it would both make it fun to find new options, as well as give a tool to look up the skill requirements in case of a standard game. The last problem I have with this system is not being able to see which abilities I already have while leveling up. Witch Hats got a cool change. Instead of giving the hero a new skill, they can also upgrade one if he already had it. They also can now give an ability, although receiving one can fuck you over since you very often need a specific one. But the free upgrade to a skill is an amazing adjustment. Units in Heroes games are the main protagonists. Everything in the game exists for them. Towns are built to hire and upgrade them. Heroes are developed to make them as potent as possible. The player that kills all of the enemy creatures is the one who stands victorious at the end. Technically, all of them are just different stats wearing model and trivia trench coats. But because of that flavor that is added to them, instead of saying that an archetype of certain stats is ass, it can be said that the flying toilet is shit. And I love the design of every unit in every faction. How unique they are, how awesome it feels to play with them, their animations, models, hit reactions, or even just victory dance. Sylvanas elves who are in love with nature and poetry, and their dungeon siblings who are more about
Fucking slaves!
both models and animations of units are fantastic. I feel like they haven't aged a day. Art direction of the game is out of this world. Each attack has so much weight behind it. Pit Lords are my personal favorites. The first time I saw them, I thought that they must be level 7 unit because of how fucking cool they are. But it's not only Pit Lords who look astonishing. Even already known units like genies have been made in a way that catches the eye while inverting expectations. Those are full-blown magical beings that instead of attacking with magic decided to go full berserk and smack enemies with something too big to be called a sword, too massive, thick, heavy and far too rough. Indeed, it's more like a heap of raw iron. I'll get to it in a second, but the quality of sound of the units is on par with design and art. It sure was surprising not to see Death Knights in the Necropolis. Instead of them there are wraiths and waits. I don't have a strong opinion on this decision, but it is funny that the Death Knights model is in the Necropolis files. My guess is that they did indeed belong to the Necropolis at some point and later got booted out for some reason. Another funny thing is that Dark Rider's trivia mentions that they have a shield, but it got deleted at some point. The early concept art shows them holding it, however in the final version it's no longer present. Before I'm gonna talk about unit designs, first I have to talk about the changes that were made to the combat. One of the major modifications Heroes 5 has got is the new initiative system. Speed used to determine both how far units can move during fights as well as their initiative. But now that old statistic has been separated into the new speed that affects only the number of cells the unit can travel plus initiative, which controls when each unit moves. Having speed no longer influence turn order is such a massive improvement. Decoupling those attributes makes it possible to create creatures that will move later in the round while still being able to traverse very far away. It also makes it much easier to balance both of those values, as well as spells or artifacts that can affect them. However, isolating those stats is only a part of the overall changes to the turn system. Playing the game even for just a short moment makes it quite obvious that something is different. How it's possible that a Fury moves 2 times before a Squire? Why is it possible to cast Divine Guidance on a unit to make it move additional time before the enemy? Also, why sometimes nothing changes after using said spell? The system became really fun to play around, but how does it work? If you ever played old Final Fantasy games, then you know what this mechanic is about. Each unit has a meter that loads at a given speed. When the bar loads, the unit moves. In Heroes 5, the twist is that the creatures move in turns rather than in real time, so there's no pressure to input the action as quickly as possible. Initiative dictates how quickly that ATB value is filled. It's linear math, so a unit that has twice as much initiative moves twice as often. I love this system. It's a unique take on a very stale formula. On top of resolving problems with a single speed stat, it also gets rid of the coin flipping nature of morals. Before, it wasn't possible to create effects that would add only half an action to the unit. It was either a full turn or nothing. Take it or leave it. It made it impossible to balance. There was no lever the designer could pull to change how good morals were once they happened. But now it's possible to create effects that give or take just a little bit of initiative. Spells like Divine Guidance can exist, which fills the ATB by 1/3. Various effects and abilities reduce ATB, making the fights more interesting. It creates an additional decision to make, a different mechanic to consider. Combat is much deeper with a system like this. I simply love it. I really do. I do. Okay. This feature has problems. While it fixes issues from the past, it also introduces some new setbacks. First of all, counterattacks suffered quite a lot. Retaliation Strike is only regained when the unit starts its turn. This makes the entire archetype of tanky juggernaut creatures much worse. They usually don't have a lot of initiative, so they don't move too often. They are expected to move once in a fight and hit like a truck. But the sad reality of those units is that once their counter is burnt, they change into punching bags. Secondly, while it's cool to cast spells that manipulate ATB value, it's not supported by the UI at all. It is not displayed anywhere in the game. It's not possible to tell how much ATB the units currently have. This makes predicting the effects of spells almost impossible. In some cases, it actually is impossible. Period. It is however possible to use mods to show that number, but Even when I knew what this value represents, I still had problems understanding why a creature with lower ATB will move before a unit with higher one. Quite frankly, displaying the ATB value on the portrait of the creature is super confusing. Now imagine how hard it would be to both explain and then contextualize those numbers to a more casual player. Someone that just plays games during the weekend. I don't believe it's possible to do. So, while I love this system and how many options it provides, I also hate how unreadable and confusing it is during a standard game. But I also understand that it might have been a better option to not show that ATB value on units. Verdyh. The system also does a very poor job of explaining how the new turns work and what is even considered a turn. Effects which duration is described in turns are quite hard to understand. That's because the units don't move in turns. However, there is something that dictates which turn it is, but just like ATB values on units, it's not displayed. It works the same way as everything else. It has 10 initiative and whenever its ATB value is filled, the next turn comes. The problem is that even with this knowledge, it's still confusing how effects such as a firewall will damage the enemies. The spell reads, deals fire damage to all creatures in this area during several turns. So when will the damage proc? At the beginning of the unit turn? Whenever the true turn passes? This initiative system, while being very fun to play around, is also very unintuitive in, quite frankly, basic cases. Combat is no longer played over a hexagonal grid. The cell shape has been changed to a square, which does have some implications. Movement doesn't cost the same in all directions, which opens up a can with a tiny bit of exploitations. Being aware of environmental blockades as well as the unit positioning is much more important than before, because now it can be used to abuse movement speed. But it's also more confusing than ever, because the effects that read that they count the number of cells traveled cannot be easily understood. For instance, jousting. How do you calculate diagonal movement? Is it considered as if only a single cell is traveled when the creature moves like that? There is an answer, don't get me wrong. The math must be there, but it's not at all understandable at the first glance by the player. It's not possible to tell which solution the developers went with when they were faced with this problem. It's also even easier than before to block huge units from accessing the backline. They take 2x2 squares and are clunky as fuck. It's just not possible for them to do anything if there's a lot of tokens in front of them. I like how it makes it possible to outplay AI, but while outplaying AI feels good, being outplayed it doesn't. Those units are extremely clunky to control. A single cell blockade is sometimes enough to render a unit useless. If a level is generated in an unfortunate way, bigger units will not be able to reach the enemy shooters at all, unless they kill everything in their way. I love it, and I hate it at the same time. Another bigger change is that now the units can have mana and can cast a set of spells. They cast the same spells as the heroes, but with a fixed spell mastery, and the spell power is determined by the stack size. It makes even small encounters with random mobs on the map more challenging. Now, instead of being afraid of ranged monsters, the player can also be afraid of filthy mages. I like it a lot. There are new ways to play the game, new threats to consider. It makes the game just a little bit more challenging to play at higher levels. But AI is absolutely horrendous at those. It's incapable of understanding how spells and effects affect the game. It very often goes for debuffs instead of just attacking. As I mentioned before, it's borderline criminal just how much it despises attacking summoned creatures. It's bad with the new mechanics. Somehow the developers managed to create very interesting functionalities, but forgot to put together an AI that would be able to properly use them. Anyway, AI being as bad as it is, doesn't make unit designs worse, and I am happy to report that those are fantastic. I can pick a random unit and guarantee that it will be a thoughtfully created one. Imps steal and destroy mana. They are obnoxious in this regard. On the world map, there's nothing worse for a mage. Losing mana to them hurts the tempo. And I love it. Because those are imps. They are supposed to be annoying to deal with. To be nasty. Which they are, in a unique way. They are not just another range unit that threatens the player with some unit loss. Instead, they target the resources of the hero himself. This is so effective at making the life of a mage miserable that the level designers made a deliberate choice to put quite a lot of them in the Warlock and the Wizard campaigns. They are there to fuck the player, which they are doing successfully. Archangels. Well, they are Archangels. They haven't changed a lot. They still resurrect fallen allies. However, I always adore that technically they are perpetually blessed because they always deal the same amount of damage. It always makes me smile. Druids look buffed as fuck. No wonder they are one with nature. The clap of their ass cheeks summons thunders. They buff allies with endurance by simply flexing their rock-solid biceps. If an enemy comes too close, they poke his eye out with a wand thick enough to be considered a barber. I bet they bench those between battles. Upgrading units also feels very rewarding. Units often get new skills that make them who they are, and if they don't have an interesting skill, their stats skyrocket, making them so much more powerful. Some units just don't feel complete when they are not upgraded. Succubi only chain with their attacks after becoming mistresses. The Hydras gain regeneration ability, which is so powerful. It allows the player to get through so many fights without losses. It's possible to play around losing golems only when goblins are upgraded and can resurrect the destroyed ones. Upgrading furies.
Fucking slaves!
Each unit feels unique, each unit feels distinct. They have some balancing problems, sure, but the creative direction of the game is astounding. It's not just different stats with different meshes and animations. Those are units created and designed in such a fabulous manner. An incredible interplay of both design and art. It's such a joy to play them. Spells. Not much to say. They deal damage, both allies and debuff enemies. Nothing too out of ordinary. However, I must say that VFXs and audio are some of my favorites. In all Heroes-like games, only King's Bounty, The Legend and Home 5 impressed me so much with the quality of effects. I love Implosion. I love the Meteor Shower. The Thunderbolt. The Fist! It's also worth noting the clever modifications made to balance some of the spells. Animated Death and Resurrection still helps the player negate his losses, while being less oppressive because of the stack's max health reduction, which is a fantastic way of balancing them. The game can have the best mechanics, design, balance, but if the level design is ass, then no one will be able to experience those. The vast majority of people who play Heroes 5 will only experience campaign missions. The quality of those scenarios will dictate how these people will perceive the game. If a veteran of the genre looks for a challenge, then sadly this game will not provide that. Quite frankly, the experience the game has prepared for more advanced players who wish to finish the game on the highest difficulty level is ass. Fortunately, the regular difficulties will provide quite an enjoyable playthrough. So let's start with fundamentals. Why is the basic experience good? Because of the pacing and variety of win conditions. I really enjoyed the campaigns. There's a variety of mission types, plus additional flavors that keep things interesting. Levels rarely ask the player to just punch the enemy until he doesn't move anymore. And even if there are levels like this, it's still flavorful. There are scenarios where units are spawned on the map every single week. It not only makes it hard to navigate, but also makes the enemy army stronger, as those creatures join the AI heroes by default. In a different mission, the player's army is constantly dwindling down, as the units desert the cause every single turn. Another one has the player push deep into the enemy land while being constantly harassed by endless waves of powerful heroes being spawned near the player's capital. Really cool stuff. I like it a lot. Especially that it also made pacing enjoyable. For a strategy game, that is an astonishing accomplishment. Heroes 5 plays a lot like some linear RPGs. While there are some slower moments, there are also levels the player just flies through. Those levels don't provide the player with a city, so he can focus on the adventure itself. It is a very solid foundation, aside from couple of blunders. Campaign missions very often make it either very hard or straight up impossible to use faction powers. During Inferno scenarios, Agriel doesn't have access to a very good army of his own race. He must rely on Sylvanas units, which cannot use gating mechanic. During the Academy campaign, it's only possible to have fun with artifacts in a single mission. In the rest of them, there's no Academy city to use it. Lastly, during the same campaign, the player also has access to the hero from the Sylvanas campaign, but in all 3 chapters he's available in, there's not even a single Sylvanas city in which he could set up his favorite enemies. It feels bad. There's a lot of abilities that are meant to make unique skills better. Being blocked from using the main power of the faction sucks, especially when the player put a lot of resources into it. I think that the developers should at least create a detached structure that can be placed and accessed without the need for town. This way, level designers would still be able to create levels in which there are no towns, but also have tools to allow the player to use the most important racial skills. Another misstep I found was lack of emergent gameplay. While there are cutscenes that make the flow of the missions way better, they are not making the player change his plans in any capacity. Very often the levels would go for a very long time without any unexpected problems. While I was playing Conquest of Io, it made me realize that even a strategy game can and should have unpredictable events pop up from time to time, because those moments can make the game much more enjoyable, unpredictable and engaging. Another problem I had was that there were no small storytelling bits sprinkled throughout the game. There was this one point in the plot when the Haven faction works together with the undead, which causes their land to be filled with zombies. During one of the missions, I noticed on the map that there were indeed zombies and skeletons standing next to farm with peasants. And I thought, oh shit, environmental storytelling, how cool is that? But then I fucked up and I had to reload the map and learned that this was the biggest luck I pulled in my life, because all those troops standing there were randomized. There's also this one place in Sylvanas campaign where there's a Raxa Sharani standing between 2 stones of wisdom. It's small, but it's something different, it looks unique. But there's just not a lot of those moments. There is no dragon case in which a single lizard lays his treasures. There's no practice range with archers in lanes and a single squire training them. Shame. Especially that this world should have some cool lore behind it. With this many Might and Magic games, I would assume that this world has a lot of cool stories to tell. Overall, the campaign is still solid. It doesn't have the most flashy and polished levels, but it's really good in terms of pacing, at least at the standard difficulties, because finishing the game on Heroic gives a vastly different experience. First of all, during the vast majority of scenarios, the player will have to do way too much with a single hero. This can make missions drag quite a bit. There's just nothing interesting in running across the entire map with the main hero to do one additional thing. Yes, however, very often it is not a real option because of how powerful the enemy heroes are. It's just not possible for a level 1 hero to do shit versus those monsters, even if he holds the player's entire army. The difference in hero build alone creates such an enormous power difference that freshly recruited heroes fold like newspaper. I noticed that this forced a lot of linearity out of the maps. Sometimes I would choose not to open additional paths because I was afraid that the AI would start taking them. With only one hero, I just wasn't able to defend multiple fronts. So while it felt bad to play in a funnel like that, it was the only option to contain the AI and slowly push it out. I would love to be able to summon secondary heroes from previous missions to bolster my flanks, or at the very least recruit heroes with higher base levels. Secondly, as I mentioned before, the enemies run away way too often, sucking out any fun of beating them fair and square. There's almost no joy in catching AI heroes because they instantly dip out, even with really big armies. It feels cheap as fuck. Thirdly, the difficulty curve on Heroic is abysmal. It sits at a very low level for the vast majority of the campaign, with the exception of a couple of massive spikes. Most maps can be won by just playing. There's nothing to do there except for pressing buttons and winning. They don't provide any challenge despite the fact that it's the highest difficulty. Strong fundamentals will be enough to go through those. However, those few missions that aren't easy are instead miserable. The first scenario in the dungeon campaign is straight up criminal. It's a handbook example of how not to create a level. It's not that complex. There are a couple of enemy towns the player has to capture, which triggers the win. It's quite simple. What makes this level atrocious is the power discrepancy between the player and the AI. This map is filled with powerful enemy heroes. I believe there are 6 of them in total. Each of them is a warlock that is capable of inflicting massive damage if given a chance. So the main focus for the player is winning fights fast, to not allow the AI to decimate the player's army. But the problem is that it's not doable, because of ridiculously tanky Minotaur stacks that can take several empowered implosions to the face. It's physically impossible to finish those fights quickly. AI has way too much army for that. So the player's army will be getting smaller with each confrontation. From my experience, around 3 fights are enough to completely wipe player's initial army, which cannot be rebuilt very quickly, because the AI builds every available creature in the first turn of the game before the player even has a chance to get to the first town. It's a miserable experience, one of the worst. The only way I was able to push through this level was by abusing the AI with some of the most disgusting manipulations. Things that will never fly against a thinking player because it's just a trick that abuses AI. It's bad. This shit, sandwiched between some of the coziest levels imaginable, is such a weak excuse for a difficulty curve. The worst part about this map is this. If the player is not able to deal with it, he has to replay the entire campaign and try an entirely different hero build. There's nothing else the player can do. He either has the build that is capable of going through, or not. Another example of the ridiculous difficulty is the third mission of the Inferno campaign, in which taking the first elven city causes each week to be proclaimed as an elves week and spawn shitloads of Sylvanas units on the map. It's not only very hard to deal with them, but they will also auto-join the enemy when he decides to smash you. This level is not doable this way. Triggering this event makes it impossible to finish. What the player has to do is just completely dodge this mechanic and go for the second elven city. This way the creatures will never spawn on the map and it will be much easier to move around. I hate it. I hate that the main flavor of the level has to be skipped in order to make this scenario playable. What do you hear when a rainbow shows up? This question sounds a bit weird, but it's actually serious. How is it possible to create such an amazing audio representation of something silent? In the real world, luck has no voice, yet its depiction in the game makes it appear as if it does, as if the audio designer put something in the game that he just heard in the wild. Audio in Heroes 5 goes just as strong as the art. Not only audio effects for special occasions like morale or luck, ambient in various places, SFXs of each unit doing a victory dance, some of them truly unique. How often do you hear a lizard-like sound from a dragon? When was the last time you heard a hydra that sounds like a couple of drunk dudes walking out of a bar? Okay, this one is a bit weird.
You should. You have the wisdom to negotiate with Alaron.
Okay, not everything about audio is awesome. Some stuff didn't work out. Technical issues are present. Some slip-ups here and there. But you better believe when I tell you that Paul Romero's pen did light up when he wrote the score for the game. The soundtrack is such an amazing journey. Each theme is so unique. And the main menu. Oh, the main menu. Every time I launch the game, I wait for a moment before I start playing. I don't know how to describe it, but sitting in front of the monitor with Romero's composition of Dies Irae and this beautiful scene playing in the background makes me want to stay a while and listen. There's something mesmerizing about 2 soul warriors fighting for survival under a withered tree to which a footman is nailed by a hair of arrows amid an ocean of bodies on a smoke-filled battleground beneath orange-painted evening clouds pierced by a small pocket of blue sky.